Non-Japanese on Reddit, what comes to your mind when you think of the country Japan? I remember reading about some really weird Japanese thing, but then it turned out only to exist in one town and even other Japanese people thought they were weird. The funny part of this is it's exactly how most of the world sees the USA. Almost everything they know is based on weirdos, assholes, and specific regional quirks, stuff most of us don't even realize happens/exists in the US. Funny you should mention it, that guy lives in my town, in Japan. He owns a bar called Hillbilly Heaven and is incredibly prejudiced towards Pac. The ironic this is, he's gay, so it struck me as somewhat ironic. I'd assumed that being a member of an oppressed group would make you somewhat more accepting of others. Guess not. The real Japanese bathrooms when I was there had floor-to-ceiling stalls and the toilet was a robot. It played soothing music so no one would hear you go, sprayed air freshener at the end after automatically flushing and had a warm water bidet and basically a Dyson air blade dryer for your bum. It was very weird feeling, kinda like you were in some futuristic place. I was half expecting someone to offer me the 3 clams. Yeah, me neither. Lived there 4 months or so and I saw none of those bathrooms. Pro tip, always have tissues for TP cause not all public ones have some, same with a tiny washcloth to dry your hands/face. Edit, words. You are about to embark upon the great crusade, toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. Right. My fucking bathroom stall better be equipped with sound dampening foam like a YouTuber's workspace if you want me to verbalize to the fucking toilet to flush my magnificent shit I just took. The first time I went to Tokyo my mom went to use the restroom in a train station. She was trying to flush it and pressed the emergency alarm inside the stall instead making it so everyone in the area could hear. She was so embarrassed. Lol, something like that happened to me. I was pissed drunk and taking the subway home when I had the urge to puke. I found a large bathroom for handicapped people and puked my guts out everywhere. I went to flush but couldn't find the button and ended up hitting some kind of emergency button that opened the door. This wasn't in a hallway either, there were dozens of people walking outside and a few made eye contact with me. Shameful display. My family is from Osaka, cities are quiet compared to western cities, almost no car horns is the standout for me. Entire lanes of hundreds of quietly queuing cars. Surreal considering how most drivers round here lose their shit at a millisecond delay to their day. In my experience, Japanese cities are way quieter than other cities I've been to. Smaller cars and trucks, less traffic in general, nobody revving their engines or honking. Also, Japanese people tend not to speak loudly in public. It's almost eerie seeing a flood of humanity come out of the train station after a train arrival, but the only sound you hear is hundreds of footsteps. I take the train daily in the US and it's a much noisier experience despite having 1/10 of the passenger volume, people having loud conversations on the phone/with their friends, people listening to music on speakers, kids shrieking, etc. and walking the streets is a similar experience. Yeah, in those day in the life of videos I've seen, of Japanese people, most have a hard day's work, which only gets compounded worse when you have to factor in the commute time. Which can take up to an hour one way for a lot of people. For the most part, it wouldn't be so bad, if it wasn't such a taboo thing to leave your job before your boss has done their day. So typically, these people will waste an extra 10+ hours a week only making themselves look busy. If you don't work from 8 AM to 6 PM at minimum, you look lazy. That's the good jobs. Routinely, some of these people aren't off work until at least 8 PM. Bonkers. And then many of them are expected to go to the izakaya with their coworkers after and get absolutely obliterated. Imagine being hungover and overworked for every day of your life. Yikes. Visited Tokyo 10 years ago and one of my most vivid memories was of the exhausted, miserable, drunk men and women in business attire on the subway in the late evening. You hit the nail on the head, you/Cas 78 when your kids are under your roof, you will want to do your best to cherish them and share the fun side of you. It is as simple as taking them to the park to play, or reading to them every night. Even if they can already read, reading out loud a story is a way of sharing, and the story can be discussed and that is also nice to share ideas. Kids need to see that adults are good people who care about their opinions. When you do this, when the kids grow up they will be good to their own kids. In addition, when a parent is not supportive, or even seen as an angry parent, the kids will grow up and never come back, because they simply do not have to. Thanks. Well, I have lived it from both sides, as a kid and, as an adult, a parent. I made a lot of mistakes even then, because it is impossible to grow up in an extremely toxic household and then have healthy responses to situations as an adult, but I did try, and I changed some things. I kind of wish, now, that there was parenting classes for people who want to raise children in a mentally healthy manner. Maybe someday the world will wake up and someone will offer classes to people. But, there are always those parents who believe that when they become a parent, they will be the best parent out there, they won't coddle their kids, and every day will be them belittling their kids because they think that's the only way to make a kid love them. It's so backwards, though. I don't understand the adoration people had for that dude after it came out. So many people saying that the work ethic and obsession he had should be something to be praised for, etc. Nah man, he had no life, his family never saw him, etc. He had, frankly, a serious obsessive disorder or was filling in something else in his life with his sushi shop. Sure, the culture may allow it, but if it's a good thing, but who knows, maybe I'm wrong. I think it's the fact that the population in Japan is aging and declining because so many people are prioritizing their careers over building a family, and the government wants to encourage people to have babies without really doing anything to address the work culture that's causing the problem. Either that, or it's about porn censorship. Probably doesn't help that most women obviously aren't willing to throw their entire career away for a kid and to be treated like crap as a mom and wife. They also don't allow foreigners a path to citizenship. In the United States there would have been a shortage of young workers just like in Japan after the economic and scientific boom raised the average age and birth rate to non-replacement levels. Of course they avoided this by having a robust system for those in need or qualified to acquire citizenship. Immigration is what America has been made of since the 1800s, and you could argue before. The UK is going to experience this issue in about 20 years as a result of Brexit. Their young workforce was coming from Eastern European countries, and now they're shifting blame onto the EU that they don't have enough workers. Always whilst conveniently forgetting that most of the time, if you fired the immigrant, they still wouldn't take the fucking job. While I'm not crediting the custom in any way, I have to point out that the two base structures of these systems exist differently. As much as racism strongly may exist in the country, America is and always has been a melting point, and there never has been any practical or explicable fear of the American identity being diluted by ethnic variacity. In contrast, there's a strong but quiet and underlying nationalistic dogma embedded in the Japanese culture, most consistently and particularly in the political field, and the junction of that dogma is the Japanese identity, which is synonymous to the ethnicity which is rather contiguously homogeneous. Though of course this in itself is the structure that needs to change for the country to grow and progress, all my rambling is really only to point out that the two countries aren't particularly comparable. The ethnicity of native Japanese isn't actually homogeneous, though. There are minority groups of non-Yamato Japanese. I have heard that they suffer a certain amount of racism from the majority group, but I'm never sure how much to believe Western interpretation of other cultures. Well, in this context I'd say homogeneous generally indicates a far majority of ethnic uniformity, which I believe in Japan accords to something like 97% or 98%. I'm not particularly educated on racist dynamics. I know it tends to be a far more silent ingrained prejudice in East Asian countries than Western countries, but anecdotally I can say that there's a disdain/negative bias towards people of darker complexions and a social idealism towards fair skin. I have a black Japanese friend who grew up there. Sorry, I think I inferred something you didn't actually imply. I took the implication of ethnic homogeneity to be that the Japanese identity is synonymous with a single ethnicity, which it isn't quite true. I mean, originally America only allowed white men to vote, and they enslaved black people. It changed somewhat after slavery was abolished, but non-whites weren't treated even remotely close to equal until very recently, and there's a way to go. Even as recent as 50 years ago my grandmother remembers that there was racism between different groups of white people. I don't know if I'd say it has always been a melting pot. As much as racism strongly may exist in the country, America is and always has been a melting point, and there never has been any practical or explicable fear of the American identity being diluted by ethnic variacity. That's not true at all. According to the census, the U.S. was 88.6% white in 1960 and the Hart-Celler Act was heavily criticized for potentially causing a dramatic shift in demographics in the U.S. Others have pointed out that slavery equals immigration, but I would say that most of America's immigration history is also rooted in colonialism and local economies. Africans were brought as slaves to work crops in the South, Chinese people were brought into the West for railroad work, Europeans flocked to the Northeast for access to low-paying jobs and joining those who had immigrated in previous generations. Not to mention the people of Alaska, Hawaii, Guam, and the Virgin Islands who were made Americans with dubious consent. They also don't allow foreigners a path to citizenship. They do, though. Especially in the last few years, they have significantly opened up the pathways to legal status. The issue is that they do not culturally allow assimilation. No matter what, you are always Gaijin, culturally, even if it illegal to discriminate among those with citizenship. That's not true. There are multiple ways to gain citizenship, although it is not easy, of course. Recently they introduced a point system as an extra incentive to work in Japan, though it mostly focuses on people with university diplomas. Otherwise you can work in Japan for 10 years, learn and examine the language, and become a citizen. Though I agree 10 years is a long time and marriage is far quicker, but you'll need an actual husband/wife for that. Oh, that would be true. Large amount of Irish people, among others, would have done that. I'm just mainly speaking on the point of people of color, which is where a substantial amount of the very cheap labor that America exploited early on came from. Not a lot of people of color in the world at the time had the money to voluntarily immigrate anywhere. Those that did went wherever they could, and the US was still the most attractive option for many of them, specifically the northern free states where at least they couldn't be enslaved. Racism was pretty much inescapable at that time.